Hello, hello. And it has been a while. We are here with an amazing group from the former dance troupe Boulder Burlesque to reflect on the legacy, the myths, the legends, and just touch base on what it's been like a year out from closing down this legendary dance troupe. So my name is Mademoiselle Tangerine. I was the previous director of the group starting in 2019, and today I'm here with Madame Merci, the founder of Boulder Burlesque, and Eartha Pussy, one of our preeminent members and former leadership member.
So good to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tangerine.
So, Madame Merci, would you just be willing to fill us in a little bit about how you got started with the troupe, what it meant to create it, and anything else you want us to know about you today?
Sure. Yeah. I was a student when the troupe was created at a little school called Eartha, which is a mindfulness-based psychology school. And so I was studying mindfulness and Buddhism. And one of the things that my program at the time really lacked in my experience was talking about sex. Like, we just didn't talk about it. And for a psychology program, it's a bit rare. Most programs across the country will have at least a course on sexuality, but our program was so devoted to mindfulness, and we did so many retreats that it was just this huge area that wasn't discussed. And so that was difficult for me because I was young, 20s. Most of us were pretty young and wild. We were a wild group of people. And there was a lot of tension in the group, and I really felt like it needed to be talked about. There needed to be outlets. And so it was sort of actually on a meditation retreat that I came up with the idea to start Boulder Burlesque. And I had a 3-part list that I wrote on meditation retreat. I'll think if I can remember it. It was like, the first was like, call Lucy, who has a dance studio, invite people and hold an audition. And that's what I did. I called Lucy, who ran Alchemy of Movement at the time, invited a lot of people from my cohort and a lot of people from the dance community at large that I danced with from Alchemy, and we held our first audition, and it ended up being a really powerful group of therapists and dancers, and there was a lot of amazing conversations that we had about sexuality and about the repressed parts of ourselves and about some of the challenges that it is to be a sexual being in such a repressive society. And so a lot of the conversations were really rich and fulfilling, and there was a lot of creativity of taking stories and fantasies and putting them onto stage. So it was a very full and wild and fun time that I think about with a lot of fondness.
What an incredible origin story, and to follow that initial impulse from that meditation retreat to see it grow and change in so many ways over the years. Wow.
Yeah, and what's so funny is like the founder of Eartha, Jogan Franco, used to talk a lot about crazy wisdom, and I felt like Boulder Burlesque was like this manifestation of like brilliant sanity, crazy wisdom, chaos, wildness, unpredictability, and like a lot of real intelligence that just sort of was birthed from that. So yeah, it was magical.
So magical. Eartha Pussy, I'm wondering, as a participant, what was it like to come into that space of brilliant chaos that Madame Merci just let us in on?
It was actually kind of refreshing, because that time in my life, which was, I'm trying to think, like 2018 or so, 17, 18, I was very much like entrenched in just like work and spreadsheets and more spreadsheets and just very like regimented stuff. And I came into it through the workshops and became kind of a workshop junkie from that. And
How many workshops did you go to?
I don't know, like all of them, if I could. Like,
And then
so
you
many
started,
workshops.
and then you started assisting in the
And then I
workshops.
started assisting in the workshops, and then you two had cornered me, I think, your very last like workshop, and was like, just do it. Just be a part of the thing. You don't have to just do it. And so
Be a part of the dance troupe.
Be a part of the troupe, and become like, because it's like you're already there, like you're kittening, you're just do something. And so I think it was like right before COVID or so, like 2019, a couple years later, after doing all the workshops ever. Like it felt like the right time to jump into all the chaos, because I had been, kind of on the periphery, doing what I do best, which is just sit back, observe, and then decide if you want to get in. And I was like, all right, let's get in. So, and then some silly person nominated me to be part of the leadership. You don't know who. It's very anonymous, by the way. But I'm only calling them silly because they're just silly goose. Was it?
Who's to say? we had a somewhat elections process to invite folks to step into leadership roles, and also volunteer opportunities like kittening, which is the burlesque version of being a stagehand.
Yep.
So it was really remarkable, like seeing you test out the different layers and being willing to step into your burlesque superpowers.
To all the chaos and bring some organizational stuff to it, as well as like they're from Jenna running it to Merci running it to Tange running it. It's like the difference in that and how I can support that backstage was super important to me. Just because, when you're performing, like the last thing you need is like, where is my chair? Where is this? Where is that? And so if I could bring that kind of calmness and confidence that, whatever happens out there, it is totally for you. I wanted each performer to be very much in the moment and just supporting them in all of that. So they can be their best selves and, have that wonderful feeling when they get off the stage of, I did it, like that rush, which I had experienced in like my previous life as doing performance art and being a dancer and whatnot, even though it's like that didn't feel like my purpose with this dance troupe. It was more of just like the support and having the wisdom and, maybe a couple technical things here and there. So yeah, but it felt like it was very much needed in my life at that time.
I resonate with that so much, Eartha Pussy. When I joined the troupe in 2016, I was just blown away. Like, oh my gosh, here's a group of people so willing to be sexually expressed, going full out with it. Like, from the get-go, I was just like, all the costumes, all the time. Like, I wanted to try it all, and yeah, like every opportunity that I was offered to give more of myself in that space was so exciting. And it was just kind of like every step of the way I got to learn about what that meant for me as a sexual being, but then it was also witnessing everyone else's process in discovering their sexuality that taught me so much about the range of sexual perspectives, especially because we don't get to talk about it very often. Like, we don't have college courses about it, even in programs where it's like, well, why don't we? It's such an important part of the human experience.
Yeah.
Which really leads me to the next question, which is, in a culture where so much of sexuality is kept in the shadow and centered around shame and taboo, what was it about Boulder Burlesque that really helped you learn about your sexuality and about the shadow parts of it? How do you see those relating?
For me?
For you, Madam Merci.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think there's so many layers. I think it's a little bit like what you just said, Tangerine, about seeing people in process. There was so much revelation for me as I was leading this group. I really didn't know where it was going to go. It felt very new and novel and edgy. And so personally, I was pushing edges, but because it was in a group format, a lot of people are pushing very different edges, and sort of seeing those edges be pushed really gave me options of like, I don't know, maybe I want to try that. fill in the that, right? Like, I think we all have our own fantasies. At the time, I was really into a lot of polyamorous pieces, a lot of really kinky pieces, a lot of, I mean, I guess what I want to say, which is like not even, I think it's related to sexuality and it doesn't always get paired, but I struggled for my whole life, like as a young person with body image challenges. And it wasn't until I joined a dance troupe where I'm getting nearly naked that I felt like I could really love myself and love my body and be celebrated in myself. And it's such a weird paradox, but it was something about being able to own and possess my body, which I'd always been at war with, and then to have it loved and celebrated and validated, that was part of my shadow, I think at the time, that was very vulnerable, that piece of like, to really be in your sexuality, you have to really connect with your body. It's a very embodied process. And so because movement is so embodied and creativity and storytelling is so embodied, and then you're with all these embodied people, it just allowed for a lot of different areas of exploration. But I would say the first kind of shadow for me was like, can I love myself as I am and not try to contort and change my body? I mean, to really be in it and to celebrate it as it is. And I really loved that about the troupe. There's all sorts of different body sizes and body types and ways of being in a body. And it was just like such a space for expression of difference. And then really like exploring for me relational difference. So what is it like if I'm dancing with 4 men on stage, or with what happens when I'm in a really amazing polyamorous, kinky, bisexual, like there's so many things I got to explore about my sexuality, and to really understand that it wasn't limited to what society was telling me was normal. And so I had so many options. Like, I could go, I guess, farther into the taboos themselves or like the specifics, but I think in general, it was a culture of pushing edges and there not really being a right way or a wrong way, but all things being celebratory and liberatory. And it's really helpful to talk about this because there was times where there would be certain feminist groups that were really against what we were doing. And that was really hard for me because I was like, you don't know these people's stories. You don't know these dancers' narratives. You don't understand what they're trying to express. You don't understand how I'm choosing to use my body and in what ways and what it's providing for me. But you have this idea that I'm exploiting myself, or that I'm doing this for the male gaze. I don't even know what to call it. It's like very heteronormative and it's very misogynistic actually in itself. And so we were getting there were moments where there was a lot of feedback where I'm like, oh, you're not getting it. Like, for me, this is my liberation. Like, my dancing and my being and my creativity is a liberatory process that is powerful for everyone here. And we're making choices that is probably the strongest expression of feminism that I've ever experienced. And you're telling me that I'm objectifying or like, I don't know, in some way harming women through that process. So there was a lot of like, I think culturally, at the time, we were kind of pushing up against a lot of different pieces. That was another part of the shadow of like, is this acceptable? Can we try this? What happens when we take someone's story of sexual abuse and we try to put it on stage? Like, what happens then? Like what edges are we pushing, and in what ways can someone reclaim their story in a new way by taking charge of something that was taken from them? So we were doing a lot of things that were maybe outside the range of like typical burlesque, but I really think we get to choose what's liberatory for us as people, and that irrespective of people's criticism or their ideas about what's right and wrong, that is a really personal choice. And for me, it felt like the entire time was a very empowered choice. And I think most people in the troupe would agree with that statement. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think? What was it for you? You came in so good at dancing, and you would choreograph so tightly, and so I wonder.
Yeah.
Was it liberatory for you, Jo?
It was a different thing. Oh, I didn't know we could put our foot in.
Oh yeah.
I forgot to bring my 6-inch heels.
I might have a pair in my closet upstairs.
Where are these pleasers at? Like, come on. Yeah, for me, coming in already with like some performance stuff, foundationally speaking, it was a different kind of liberation. It was exploring a type of dance that, at first I was clearly uncomfortable in. Like, those first couple were not, I'd say stage ready, but it was important for me to do that just to get over a certain hump with me and my body, because I also suffered from a lot of body stuff. I've been both on the like bigger side for me, and where that's too uncomfortable, and I've been like a little too small where that's too uncomfortable. So I would just absorb everyone else's vibe. I'm very much fed off of like the energy around me, especially in the dance troupe. It was amazing just to be around so many different people and go with them on their journey, like side by side. What they're feeling and going through and experiencing, and I too went along with that. Most of my like hard work happened in the workshops for the most part. But yeah, you made an interesting point about not moving your body a certain way in order to like do this for like the male gaze and whatnot. I find that both empowering and very daunting at the same time. And then to sit in that paradox was amazing for me. Like that was the most powerful growth moment ever, where I could just be that contradiction, and it's okay. Like you don't have to land one way or another. Like whatever it is today is what it is today. And so that was super critical for me in my sexuality and my relationship with my body. Because I often just kind of am a chameleon, you know, because, you know, with me and my shadows, plural, everything's plural with me and my characters, it's very much like regimented, very robotic, very just like, this is how you're going to be, this is how you get to turn people on, you do these things, and then that's it, where it's like, I can grow out of that. I can use that as a protective layer sometimes. I can just have a very understanding and almost like friendship with my shadow. And without this group and that opportunity, I never would have been able to get there. And you know, thankfully, like my therapist who went to school with Mademoiselle, and like low key stalks you, was like, you have to do this, and I would stalk the events, and I'd be like, no, not this time, no, not this time, and then I finally did it, and was like, oh my god, it was not that hard. I mean, it was hard, but it wasn't as bad, and it wasn't like a big ugly cry like I thought I was gonna do like the whole time or something. But it was critical for me to be like awkward at times, and it was critical for me to be robotic at times, and just accept those parts of myself as parts of myself and not all of myself. Does that make sense? Am I talking in circles?
You're making a lot of
Okay.
sense. Yeah.
So much sense. Like what I hear is getting to try on different parts of our identities through performance art. Does that seem right?
Correct.
Yeah. I had a really similar experience with that too, of, you know, getting to move through different versions of my character and emphasizing that there's always room for change. Like when you're performing on a stage, things get to be malleable and shift, and there's less, I think there's space for less expectation of fitting into roles. You really get to try on like, well, what would it be like to be the super foxy seductive vixen? What would it be like to be the like really slutty clown girl? What would it be like to be in drag? And it's a space where we've cultivated an environment, and through all Madame Mercy's hard work and building up the Boulder Burlesque audience community of audience members who understand that that's what they're signing up to see when they bought a ticket to. And I think that was one of the like really powerful assets, was performers being able to feel comfortable enough to try on those pieces. Like me being able to feel comfortable enough in those first couple shows to invite my mom. Whoa, that happened.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's
For
amazing.
other performers to invite their families into the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which like begs me to wonder, like in Boulder Burlesque having closed its doors for now, what what do you see as being like some of the greatest things it gave to the community?
Aw. It's so hard to know entirely. I know what it gave to me, which was like a space to be myself and to speak myself and to feel myself and to be so playful and silly, and it gave me a mask of a character that allowed me to become more than I was at the time that I created the character. So it allowed me to evolve in a lot of ways with like the most badass people on the planet. Like, just still, I hold every person from that group and those who I saw, you know, under your leadership and under your leadership after I left. With so much reverence and like closeness in my heart. It's just like an extended family. I really feel that. So that time in my life, I think it'll forever be one of the most pivotal times of my life and the most fun. A friend of mine said, "You suck the marrow out of life," and I'm like, that was the time where the marrow was sucked out of life. Like, it was just like the best. Audience members and the community at large. I think where Boulder Burlesque was born is Boulder, Colorado, and it's a startup space, and there's a lot of room for a lot of creativity and new ideas and innovation, and a lot of room for the arts. And so I came from I came from the Bay Area, and when I moved from there, I was like, oh, I feel like I was like a little fish in a big pond, and I felt like a big fish in a little pond. And so my experience of being in Boulder was like anything could happen. Like, you just have an idea, and then there it was, and it became something way bigger than I think any of us could have imagined. We sold out so many huge venues and huge shows, like where a dance troupe maybe wouldn't normally do that. Maybe a band, or maybe, but it became just like such rich theater. Got a lot more organized under the two of your leadership than it ever was under mine. That wasn't my strength. Was not the making sure the chairs were available. Was not my skill set. But in my experience, you know, Boulder was craving it because sometimes it's not the edgiest place. You know, the arts are there and they're not always the edgiest. So there was this way in which I felt just so accepted and so loved, by so many members of the community. And then people in the show would be like, oh my gosh, that was incredible. I just like learned so much about my own sexuality and about my own self. So I think it helped audience members ask the questions that the dancers were asking, and gave them some insight into their own experience and what was potentially possible that they weren't accessing. And even like to study, a lot of the task of the audience was like to study what are your turn-ons and what are your turn-offs, and just be curious, like, oh, how interesting, I've never seen that before, and like I'm really turned on, or like, ooh, that's not my kink, or that's not my thing, I'm not feeling that. So there was really this practice, like awareness practice of even audience members, of just this self-study, like what's really happening, what are we doing, what is this evoking in me, what's wanting to live in me after. And I think that's a real gift. That was a real gift for the Boulder community, in my experience, hearing a lot of audience feedback.
I'm really struck by even you just speaking about how powerful the connections were with the different participants. And I'm remembering one day walking down Pearl Street after who knows what burlesque shenanigan, and I was just like, Madam Merci, can I tell you this thing about my sexual kink that I haven't told anybody yet? And I'm not going to tell you.
I know what it is.
But your response was like, yeah, a lot of people ask me that question. I was like, oh my gosh, like why? Well, it's just something like helping people feel comfortable talking to me about sexuality. Like, people crave that. They want somewhere where they feel like they can talk about the taboo, like talk about the things that they do desire that they haven't been able to express yet. So
Yes.
whether that is through burlesque storytelling or creating the character or through the discussions that happen behind the scenes within the group, I know that happened for countless people. And to me, I think that's one of the biggest legacies of Boulder Burlesque was like any little moment where somebody could feel brave enough to explore an aspect of their sexuality they hadn't before, like I got to do.
Yeah,
And,
that's so
like,
true.
I
I'm
saw
just
so many people do.
I'm just remembering this audience exercise where we'd have people write down their desires, like their secret fantasies, and we'd read them aloud, like anonymously, but we'd like draw them from a hat. Do you remember that? And
So
we'd like
fun.
read aloud like the secret fantasies. But there's something just so
Yeah.
that's, like, really interesting. Thanks for sharing.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, anything you would want to add on that, pussy?
Let's see. From the audience might be, I think, actually like discovering new turn-ons, of course. Maybe some turn-offs, who knows? But yeah, just kind of like discovering things and art that they didn't even know existed, that wouldn't have happened without our community in our dance troupe. And also, like, we would get so many like, when are you guys gonna do a workshop? When are you guys gonna do a workshop? Like, that kind of inspiration, just saying, you know, if our performers can do it, so can you. And giving it that kind of empowerment through our performance art, I think, is the thing that will be legacy of Boulder Burlesque, for sure.
I love that. Yeah, I think it's worth saying too. I don't know if everyone knows this, but like the workshops were a way people had that, and then every single year we created a brand new dance troupe of people who either hadn't been on stage before. Most of them had not ever been a burlesque dancer before. Some of them had some, you know, amazing erotic dance experience, but most people were really very beginner. And so every single year, annually, we would start a beginner troupe. And that's the same kind of principle of like, I want to do the workshop, I want to be on stage, I want to be part of the troupe. And it does take a lot of risk. And I mean, I think also a lot of work is leadership. It's not like you just have this really great troupe and they know all the moves and all the dances and they've been dancing together for 10 years, like the Gazettes or something. This is not that. I mean, it was like every year, and there was an advanced troupe who also kind of grew out of that, but that first experience was really kind of taking a brand new group through that, and that was really liberatory too.
Yeah, really special times, really vulnerable times.
Yeah.
I really hold in my heart also, in reflecting about Boulder Burlesque, is the motto of the troupe. So that's maybe like a capstone that I would want to reflect on with both of you tonight is our theme motto. What is it?
Where the profane is sacred.
Where the profane is sacred.
Where the profane is sacred. Yeah. How did you come up with that, Madam Mercy? Is it another
I don't know.
stroke of
I really
contemplative
don't
genius?
know, and I do not believe, like I really will say that the genius of this group was not always me. Like, it really wasn't. It was mostly not me. I had a seed of an idea and I had this inspiration on meditation retreat, but most of the brilliant ideas of this group came from the group itself and from the power of connection. Early on, you know, there were so many people, like I didn't even know how to really dance that well, and I definitely didn't know how to choreograph or count moves. Like, I didn't come into the troupe with performance training, or so there were like expert dance teachers who led a lot of the group dances, and so there was this sort of like cultivation of the process, which was very much beyond me. So I'm sure I didn't even come up with the phrase. So Tangerine, I'm sure Tangerine, I did not come up with the phrase.
So you didn't come up with the phrase "where the profane is sacred." I have seen it mentioned, the concept of sacred profanity in contemplative texts. So I imagine it's part of that, you know, that chaotic brilliance that came in, again, with power of community, power of concepts that we sometimes are just holding unconsciously. And yeah, I would definitely resonate with the gifts of the community in that space were really what built it. And I'm so grateful for just the wide array that every single person who passed through that group contributed.
Yeah. I mean, you're making a good point. It's like within the tradition, within certain contemplative traditions, and this is not all contemplative traditions, there are many contemplative traditions that are very repressive around urges and around desires and around self-pleasure. Like a lot of things are very repressed in certain religious spheres at large, but in the contemplative tradition that we were training in, there really is something sacred about sexuality as a primary fundamental life force that is creativity, it is aliveness, it's basic brilliance, and it can be contorted into neurosis, and you can see that in a lot of different aspects too. And so it's an interesting way of looking at sexuality. It's like often within our darkness there can be so much light and so much brilliance. I think when we even think of the shadow itself as like we go into the darkness to find the brilliance within. And so within contemplative practice there's an idea that nothing is excluded and everything is included. And so how can we start to include the parts of ourselves that get pushed away and pushed aside and cast out, either from the oppressive systems that we live in or our own internalized way that we push parts of ourselves down, which are very connected. So in this, the task was to really start to look and examine and to be curious about and be willing to be surprised about what may be emerging and what may be wanting to come through. And that really includes the profane as a sacred act. I'm just even thinking, like, what does the definition profane mean? Like, in this moment, like, what is exiled? What is not allowed? Or what is judged?
What is taboo?
What is taboo?
What is othered?
What is othered? Yeah, and how do we find, like, the brilliance within it all?
I feel like we're playing like a burlesque Jeopardy game right now. What is sacred profanity? I will take a sacred profanity for 100.
You'd assume, as the founder of the group, I know, but I think I'm still learning. I think I'm still learning about what it is, and it changes. I think that's something to be really clear about within the self, is that the self changes so much, and then there's a new thing to reconcile or to examine. My most recent journey was out of, like, maidenhood into motherhood, and that has come with so many new aspects of the self and the darkness and the taboo and the, like, understanding of being in a new body. But we're doing that all the time in life, and so how do we keep pivoting, to use a dance term, into what's new and what's next and what's needed and what needs to be healed and what needs to be liberated, I think is an ongoing conversation that the title really allowed for.
Beautifully put. Eartha Pussy, any sacredly profane reflections from you?
Being raised in like a super Christian household, profanity and anything that was like of the devil or evil or seen as that in a very traditional, like, Judeo-Christian vibe, if you will, like, it was very, like, boundary and edgy pushing for me to just, like, embrace that. Like, 'cause I think when I joined the troupe at the time, I had been polyamorous for quite some time, just kind of doing it on my own, figuring that out, and getting comfortable with that, and kind of taking that initial feelings and even, like, wiggles about it and kind of moving that into my body and making it accepted and embraced, and even, like, making it a priority at times, like, was very powerful for me. And it was critical at that time in my life to do that and lean into that. And I think today, having that experience has just taught me so much about myself, so much about parts of just the human experience that get suppressed for whatever reason, because it's not proper or whatever, is just so I hate to like use the word empowering again, but I'm gonna do it.
Why not?
Right. Like, I know I didn't bring my thesaurus with me today, but it's been great, and it is still a journey of what that actually means now that I'm a little older, and hopefully wiser, and know when to lean into that and not go off the deep end, and kind of ebb and flow with that who I am, and taking that with me. Like, that's super important from my experience, both past, present, and future. Like, I hope to keep doing it.
So
Well, Madam Merci, Eartha Pussy, it's been such an honor to sit around this fire with you and reflect on the power, the empowerment, the sexuality, the learnings from Boulder Burlesque. And I'm really taking away from this conversation just so many affirmations about how this work is still alive. And my desire is that it is still alive in the hearts of the people who passed through this group, and that it will continue to unfold based on what we've learned and how we've been touched also, just in the way we live in the world.
yeah, that's so beautiful. I wonder, Tangerine, if there's anything, I mean, I really don't know who's going to be watching this, but you ended up taking over the troupe and really holding it in a really powerful way. Really changed a lot from when I was leading the group. Is there anything you want to say about what you learned during that time of your own experience that would feel good?
Absolutely. So thinking back to learning about shadow and like the parts of ourselves we choose to show or hide, that was such a big learning for me in stepping into leading a group around that held so much sexual energy and so much vulnerability. It was definitely a space where both a lot of joy and a lot of chaos emerged, and it really taught me about places where like I have so much more digging to do, and always believe I will be digging in places I haven't examined my own perspectives as a sexual person. So I've been really, really humbled by the bravery of all the people who have passed through the group, and really gotten to reflect on like where can I really hold gratitude for the gifts of my sexual experiences, and where can I like really lift up other people in their journeys also by becoming more aware of the places where I'm stuck.
Yeah. I mean, I think this that goes back to the shadow piece. Is like someone, I remember we were on leadership, and there was another leader at the time who was like, we were having a lot of challenges in the group, and the group had, of course, we're dealing with sexuality. So she said, sexuality is such a volatile energy. It is so volatile, and it is so intense that of course we're dealing with this in our leadership. And I was like, it was this aha moment where you see the macro of like, okay, we're trying to work with sexuality in the shadow. Of course, everything's falling apart, and I'm failing as a leader, and I'm getting lost in my own narcissism and self-absorption and my own brilliant ideas, and then the group is fighting me, and I'm, like the evolutionary process is so intense, I think, when you're working in this way, and especially when you're taking a seat of leadership. So it doesn't surprise me what you're saying, and I really resonate with it too, is like the group gave me back so much of what I needed in terms of my evolution, as painful and as like difficult as it was at the time. And I know you went definitely through your own challenges. We were all present for a lot of that, and I just love the way you're talking about it as like an analysis of what do I have to learn? What are the identities that I came in with? What might I be missing? And where can I grow? And how can I still honor and celebrate every single thing that this has been for every single person who's walked through this door? Which is such a beautiful way of looking at it. I really appreciate it. Hearing that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Well, thanks for joining us for this little fireside chat. I'm grateful for you tuning in. I'll post some resources for current burlesque options in the Colorado area in the comments of this video if it is something you're interested in exploring, because there's still some really great teachers out there. So wishing you the best. If this video got you curious to maybe step into the next layer of exploring your sexuality, your shadow, we really lift you up in whatever that journey looks like for you.
Yes, may it be so.
Okay. Mwah!